Welcome all, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Sarah, and I'm one of Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake's Program and Outreach Coordinators. And so before we get started, we're just going to go over a very brief tech orientation just to ensure that we all have a pleasant experience for tonight's program. Also, as a reminder, we are recording, so if you do not wish to have your face or picture shown during this webinar, please feel free to turn off your camera now. We also ask that you keep yourself muted during this presentation. And if you have to get up and move around, we please ask that you turn off your camera again, just to prevent any disruptions. Last call for anyone that wants to turn off the camera as we are recording. And last but not least, there's a chat function. It's just a great way to ask for help should you need assistance. One of our amazing IPC staff here will be happy to help you. Next. You'll just see a quick picture of myself and some of my contact information for folks that are in the DMV area. If you're looking to connect, please feel free to reach out to me. There's my contact information. And then following, I have my wonderful colleague here with me tonight, which is a very special occasion, Molly Rudo. We have a lot of different people at our organization. We have insect people, plant people, bird people, and she's one of our fish people here tonight. So very excited to have her here. Next, we're going to take a look at our program lineup. As we're going to begin with a land acknowledgement, we'll have an opening reflection, followed by some information about our organization for any new folks in the room. And then you'll get to meet our panelists for an in-depth discussion about tonight's amazing topic, a continuation of our invasive species throughout the Chesapeake Bay region with a focus on predatory fish. We're also going to follow up by opening the floor for Q&A, and then we'll close with another reflection. So now I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge this land and these waters that were stewarded by many who came before. So please join us in recognition, while muted, as today we hold space for reflection on and gratitude for the land upon which we live and the local waters that support and nourish us all. We recognize that this land and these waters were stewarded by many who came before us. We reflect together as people of faith in response to the calling of our hearts to come alongside the original stewards of these lands and these waters that sustain us all. We seek to change the narrative of this story, our story, towards one of harmony with the gifts of creation and all living beings. And there's a link that will come in the chat that we encourage you to learn more about by visiting. It's going to take you to an interactive map that just shows a snapshot in history for the original stewards, but keep in mind, this is a snapshot of 1,000 years ago, while we realize there's more than 15,000 years of indigenous history in our region. Thanks so much, Molly. And next, I'd like to share a lovely picture. I'm sorry, a lovely prayer. This actually was provided by Molly, and I fell in love with it immediately, entitled Contentment. So how good God is to me, he said. Although I have no mansion tall, I have a shanty by the shore where I can hear the wild goose call. No wealth of fame I claim as mine, but just a lot of little things. And when night comes, I bow my head and realize I am king. What a wonderful reflection, especially as we're coming into the spring season. I know I feel much better. Now I want to shift gears and just share a little bit of gratitude for all the sponsors that fund this work. As you can see here on this slide, they give us the capacity to operate as a connector organization, which you can see on the next slide, just illustrates our role and how we help congregations in search of resources to pursue environmental stewardship projects with the support of local government agencies, technical partners, and of course, our partner congregations. And so if you want to find out a little bit more about who's doing this work, you can take a look at some information on this slide. Shows you a little bit about our One Water partnership. And on the next slide, we're going to take a look at our Faithful Green Leaders training that's coming up this fall. This is our last training for 2025. It's hard to believe. So if any green teams are out there, please RSVP. We'll be sending some additional information about that upcoming training. And last but not least, before we jump into the topic, we just want to remind folks that we have numerous available resources on our site. I'm still constantly blown away about how many resources we have, whether they're action kits, prayers, other resources that can help you connect to folks that are doing this work as well. And so if you need help, just reach out to your regional coordinator. All right, let's delve straight into the heart of tonight's discussion. The topic of tonight's webinar, again, it's a continuation of our ongoing discussion about invasives in the Chesapeake Bay region with a spotlight on predatory fish species. Our first speaker of the evening is Evangeline Sawyers from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, a very, very special partner of ours. She's in the invasive fishes management team. And everyone, please welcome Evangeline.
Hello, good evening. I work at Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and currently right now we're working on Conowingo Dam removals when they remove fish from the fish lifts, which I'll kind of dive into a little bit in my presentation. And I help with a lot of invasive fish tournaments and outreach events throughout the state and just getting more marketing exposure about invasive species and how bad they are on top of the research we do with the state. Next. And on here, I do have my email listed for anybody that needs it. And my last slide in the presentation that I give, I have my email listed again, along with my head of the invasive fishes program, the manager, Branson Williams. And I'll have both our emails at the end. But hello again, my name is Evangeline Sawyers. I go by Lena. Next. So when we talk about invasive species, we typically like to define native species first and go from there. It's usually the easiest way to understand an invasive species. A native species is one that naturally occurs in an area, and that's something like bald eagles here in our state. We see them pretty frequently, I suspect. And if you're not from our state, but native species around North America that you'll see. We also have non-native species, not just here in Maryland, but all across the country. And they are not invasive because they don't cause harm once they're introduced into a new environment. So this could be things like your food crops, tomatoes that you plant in your garden, for instance. They don't take over an area usually, and sometimes they're even hard to get to sprout in the first place. You can also think of pheasants that come from Asia and have become a really good game species in North America for us. So invasive species are ones that when you introduce them into a new environment, they establish very well, and they typically cause harm to the ecology of a region, the economy, or they can even impact human health. So you've probably heard of the Burmese pythons in the Florida Everglades, which is the first on the left there, that snake in the tree. They are a very, very large snake species. And right now they're expanding throughout the Florida Everglades and really hurting the small mammal populations down there. And they're even beginning to move a little northward into other parts of Florida, and they're going to hurt those wildlife communities as well. Now, a little closer home on the East Coast, you could say the spotted lanternfly, which is seen there in the middle. And they're really going after our fruit crops like grapes. And I know there's a lot of wineries next to me, so it's been impactful just here at home. Or you can even think of the Bradford pears, which you will see on the right-hand side. And when they were brought here, they were thought to be sterile. However, that didn't really work out in the end when it comes to pushing out our native trees from woodlots. And they really are common in a lot of neighborhoods that have like large amounts of homes in them that are built probably like 90s to the 2000s, I'd say. There's a lot near me as well. Invasive species cause a lot of harm around the world. Recent estimates are about $423 billion, and they're just going to keep expanding from there. I need to update my slide. Next. So in Maryland, we have 3 primary fish species that we consider invasive threats. And these are the blue catfish, which you can see in a photo on the left being held by a fisherman. Then we have the flathead catfish, which would be on the right-hand side. And we also have the northern snakehead, which is also called a Chesapeake Chana in different restaurants. We don't typically use it at the department talking about scientific papers or anything. However, Chesapeake Chana has been a rename for restaurants to get people to eat the fish more, just like mahi mahi. They're all relatively new to Maryland waters, and they have very quickly expanded their range and also their abundance. They are all freshwater fish as well, but they have the capacity to withstand brackish waters here in the bay. They reach very large sizes typically. They can spread a lot, and they reproduce quite often or in large amounts. Next. In Maryland, we have this map here that we have done with different catch data that we have from the public or just from our sampling population data. So if you look, all of the blue spots are blue catfish area, and they have expanded really rapidly over the past 5 years alone. Then we have the horizontal lines are where we find northern snakehead, and the vertical lines are where we find flathead catfish. And I'll kind of dive in deeper on their regions that we find them when I dive into the fish specifically. But there are a lot of maps online that you can find to find this information from Maryland DNR. Next. So I'll start with the blue catfish. Currently, this occurs in every major tributary of the Chesapeake Bay, including most small tributaries or creeks. They are found to consume over 40 different prey items in the bay. And as they mature, they will switch to mostly fish protein. They can grow to be over 100 pounds. Currently, the Maryland state record, I believe, is 86 or 87 pounds. And we are finding fish that are reaching 80 pounds in the Chesapeake Bay, not regularly, but they're common. They're also seeing a growing tolerance to salinity levels in waters over time, which is, as I said earlier, they are a freshwater catfish, and they are native to Central America, so the Mississippi area, or Central USA, so they're the Mississippi area of the country, and they are the largest catfish native to North America. They are very opportunistic feeders, so they are doing really well in our bay. Next. They were first stocked into Virginia rivers during the 70s and the 80s, and that was the James, York, and Rappahannock rivers. And since then, they have rapidly expanded their habitat within the bay. They are also known to highly outcompete our native fish species and native catfish for resources like prey and habitat space. Next. This is just a small graph showing a diet study that we did in the Patuxent River only, and this was for fish prey species specifically. We see about 30 to 40 prey items in blue catfish guts typically, not just from the Patuxent River. They are generalist omnivores, so they'll go after things like blue crabs, freshwater mussels, subaquatic vegetation, Atlantic menhaden, striped bass, gizzard shad, and our other native and non-native populations of catfish here. As they mature, they will start to specifically feed on fish, and their growth, their length to weight growth can just be, you can have a fish that you age to be 5 years old, but it is bigger than a fish that you age to be about 7 years old. So it kind of, they can just start eating and growing really, really fast. They're very healthy fish in that regard. And during this research in this study, they found populations like river herring and American shad inside blue catfish guts. And so those are anadromous fish species, which are really important. They come from saltwater, come up into freshwater to spawn, and then go back out to saltwater during the year. And we are actively working to restore those populations, linking them with blue catfish predation. Next. Right now, our program has just entered into its second year technically as the invasive fish management program at DNR. So we're on the newer side, And we are currently establishing long-term monitoring programs of blue catfish for a better population understanding and hopefully to use them across multiple river systems in the Chesapeake Bay. We're using a lot of new technology like drone footage while we electrofish for these catfish because sometimes you'll see hundreds of them come up and they are stunning the species when you do this, when you're electrofishing. They're not being like killed, they're just being stunned. So after about 60 to 120 seconds, they can swim away. And it's really nice having the drone because while it's recording this footage, we can run it through an AI software to count the number of blue catfish, their white bellies that come up that we're able to see. We're still working the kinks out because, this is new technology. We don't know exactly for sure yet how dependable it could be, but it's all able to get all of the fish that we can't get in our nets, which is really helpful. And this is going to all help us in better tracking of their population numbers for future population projections and working with US Geological Survey. Next. I'm going to dive into the northern snakehead now. They were first found in a Crofton pond in 2002, but even though the population was removed from that pond by 2004, they had expanded into the Potomac River. And as of today, they are found in every major Chesapeake Bay tributary and most of the smaller tributaries and creeks. They are even found in some impoundments and reservoirs in central Maryland. We have a positive ID of one by biologists just this year from Liberty Reservoir up towards Eldersburg and Sykesville, Maryland. So if anyone's familiar with that area, we have concluded they are there, along with a lot of reports in Lake Linganore near us, Pretty Boy Reservoir, Loch Raven below the dam. We have a lot of reports. And through our studies, we have found recently this fish can at least spawn twice a year, but I hear from watermen myself that they think it could be more than that, but we don't know, but we definitively do know they spawn at least twice a year right now. Next, please. So there was recent research done for the Blackwater and published for the Blackwater River that found fish populations have differed after the northern snakehead established in there. So more fish that they don't enjoy eating that are not native, like carp and goldfish, were increasing in biomass. However, things that they are native species that they do like to eat have biodiversity and species abundance have decreased in that river system since their introduction. And they're a very active fishery to be in, honestly. Like a lot of people like to fish for them, especially with bow fishing. They've become a pretty prized part of Maryland's fishery, even if they are an invasive fish species. And I fish for them sometimes. They are very fun to catch. Next, please. So we do a lot of work with northern snakehead currently. One thing we are doing, we partner with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because they are currently running a tagging study that is done in different rivers in Maryland. I just helped out of Dundee Creek Marina doing some tagging. This study is giving biologists data on population abundance and movement of these species. We see at the department also that we also participate at the department with a collaborative project at Conowingo Dam, and it's with Normando Associates and J.J. McDonald. So to remove, restore, and donate these fish to local food banks and other food shelters around Maryland. And during those spring fish lift operations that I mentioned earlier, which is when anadromous fish are coming up through the bay to Susquehanna and they can't get above Conowingo Dam on their own. So there's a fish lift that will pull up fish. I don't remember how many times per hour they do this. And they will sort through the fish and they will release things like gizzard shad. They will take any American shad or river herring or even rockfish into a truck, and then they will transport them above the dam and release them so they can still spawn above the dam in the reservoir, and they can make their way back down out into the ocean again. When they get any invasive fish species, they will pile them into a cooler for us where we at DNR come and take care of the fish, and then JJ McDonald will pick the fish up from us to take them to those food banks and other shelters. We also sometimes use them for events that we want to do free samples of snakehead to the public to get people trying it and understanding it's a really delicious fish. I love it, and I feed it to my family all the time. Next, please. And last but certainly not least, we have the flathead catfish. These guys prefer slower moving water or deeper channels and pools of water. So like reservoirs, big fan, especially above Conowingo Reservoir. They have a very similar fishing style to all catfish, really, including blue catfish. These guys definitely hang out more towards the bottom, whereas blue catfish actually are more like in the middle or like lower water column. They're not the standard bottom feeders that we think of when we think of catfish. And that's also why they have such a different, interesting taste. And they definitely have a regional taste now that they've been in the bay. Now, for the flathead catfish, they got stocked in PA to create a game fishery for PA, and they are the second largest catfish in North America. Next. These guys were also stocked the same time that blue catfish were stocked in Virginia, and they had made their way down to our river systems by like the 90s to 2000s. They currently range from the upper Susquehanna River, Conowingo Reservoir, and the non-tidal upper Potomac River. So that's like Washington County in Maryland. They also are all the way down by Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has all three of these invaders right outside the Anacostia and Potomac rivers. So concern for these guys is really high for the consumption of native species, just like those blue catfish, with our freshwater mussels, river herring, our shad species, and other really important Maryland native fishes is high. They are generalist feeders as well. All three of these guys fit that category. Next. And for these, we have two different types of studies going on where we are tagging fish on the upper Potomac non-tidal waters to determine their population movement, growth, and the harvest rates of flathead catfish. We do electrofishing surveys as well to get a population abundance and distribution on the upper Potomac. And on the Susquehanna, Maryland DNR and PA Fishing and Boating Commission are currently surveying populations using baited hoop nets on the Susquehanna River and removing otolith ear, which are ear stones. You can see in the photo to the right of me. And they are aged just similar, like when you cut a cookie from a tree and you count the lines of a tree. You can do the same thing with these ear stones, otoliths, in fish and get a relatively accurate age count. And we typically save those and link that data with length and weight to get really good population projections and to really understand what size and possible age group or weight class would be the most beneficial to target to eliminate the population better. Next. And a lot of our management relies solely on removal of biomass. So getting fish out of the water and our ecosystems and making these fish, marketing these fish to Maryland residents and making it really easy to get out there and fish for them. They have an open season all year long, and they have no limit on harvest. So it's a really sustainable fish for if you want to support a lifestyle off of them, following like consumption advisories from the local rivers around you. And just spreading the word and educating Marylanders about how to fish for them and prepare them and cook them and eat them at home. We do a lot of fillet demos, and we're trying to put out a lot more recipes on how to cook these invasive species because a lot of people get kind of intimidated by that part. We also are doing our part promoting local restaurants and grocery stores that are currently selling fish for public consumption. And right there, I have a photo of the public angler access map. I can always put it in the chat later. It is a tool for fishermen to go out and get catch rate data at different systems in the state. And you can kind of understand what you want to target, where you want to target it, and what's your best location to do so. It's a really, really important tool for us, for Maryland anglers. And next. And once again, I have my email down there at the bottom and my program manager, Branson Williams' email. If anyone has any questions they just don't think about after this presentation's over to ask and they want to ask anything further, feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, and thank you guys for doing your part with invasive species and being here today.
Thank you so much, Lena. Before I introduce our next amazing speaker, I just want to reiterate, it's shocking to realize the costs well over 400 billion per year globally. That's just really highlighting for me the dire need for protection and proactive approaches instead of reactive. And then last but not least, the interesting rebranding you mentioned of like the snakehead fish to kind of entice folks to eat them. And so I appreciate you confirming that it's delicious because Molly, my colleague, has also confirmed that it's a very good fish. So I will be tasting it. Next, I want to welcome David Sikorsky. He's the executive director at Coastal Conservation Association. I will open up the floor. Please go ahead and take it away, David.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, so I'm the executive director of CCA Maryland. The screen has a little bit of a background on me. I'm basically somebody that was taken fishing when I was a young man and taught how to respect the outdoors and appreciate it and be a steward. And I'm very blessed that I've had plenty of really inspirational and great people in my life, which led me to my role I'm in now as executive director. I've been director for 8 years. It's my full-time position at CCA Maryland. We're a state chapter of a nationwide organization that I'll explain in a moment in more detail. But I found it because I like to go fishing, and I had time to go fishing post-college and a little bit of flexibility. I didn't get married until recently, and I have a young family now. But in my 20s, I really spent a lot of time just getting out there and enjoying our outdoors as much as I could, and that led me to our organization. Uh, which is just folks that like to get together and share what we have in common, but is bigger than that. We have a lot of great work that we do. So, on the slide here, as it says, we have a big habitat program, our CCA Living Reef Action Campaign. That's one important component of the work we do. I also work in fisheries policy in many ways, and many of our members do as well. And really trying to advise and educate the public on conservation and ultimately it teach people how they can find resources that are available and participate in the public process. And so as it relates to invasive fish, next please. One of our programs that we started is the Great Chesapeake Invasives Count, and we did this in the spirit of trying to support data collection for the state agencies. Given my role and what our organization does, engaging with DNR and other agencies that are either federal or coast-wide management bodies. Pardon me, I didn't realize that thing was dinging, whatever that is. And ultimately, we are engaged as advocates and participants in fisheries up and down the coast in many ways. And so that gives us a unique perspective into the nuts and bolts and how things work in the fisheries management system. And then it leads us to where, we have these invasive fish, and how do we attack them? How do we utilize them? They are a resource. What does that mean? And what will be the evolution as these fish continue to grow? And the Chesapeake has been an ongoing thing that I've seen in our membership, and our leadership have been focused on in our coordination with these agencies. So in 2020, when the world changed, we were planning invasive species outreach work because in 18 and 19, it was a period when invasive species spread all over, especially the blue catfish. It was the freshest period of record in the Bay's recorded history, if I'm not mistaken, for the longest period of days in a row of continuous fresh water flow. What that allowed for was these fish to migrate throughout the watershed, and it was soon after 2018-19 that we saw blue catfish in reproductive seine surveys. So they're called young of year surveys. that looked for various fish species out there in the watershed. And it was 2020, the first year that we saw these young blue catfish, which is indicative of their reproduction in that section of the bay. And so it meant, uh-oh, this once idea that Virginia started 50 years ago is now ubiquitous. It's everywhere, as Lena talked about. So there's plenty of examples across the country where recreational anglers work together with management agencies to try and collect data, and that's what the Great Chesapeake Invasives Count is. It's all about celebrating those faces on the screen there, rewarding people for helping collect data. That data supports management. Next slide, please. So this would have been the better slide as I was explaining CCA, but I had them out slightly out of order. But on the left here is really what we're all about. We have a membership. We're a 501c3 membership organization. When you see on our striped bass sticker, our rockfish sticker there, join CCA, it's instructions. It says join us, literally. Go to the website and become a member, like so many on the screen and in the world that I get to work with every day. Our membership drives our advocacy, drives our fundraising, drives our habitat work, and it's all an ecosystem. That's a closest graphic to the way it flows, but all those arrows, interconnect in many different ways. And our purpose is to advise and educate the public on conservation. It's part of what we're doing tonight, and this has been repeated for nearly 50 years in the CCA world, since 1977 when the organization was founded. But ultimately, we do care about the recreational angler as an opportunity for people to interact with their public resource that belongs to them. In the programming, our Living Reef Action Campaign programming, I speak to students and we work throughout the state. We did 35 different activities across the region in about a 7-month window last year, building reef balls, heavy artificial reef units that we then take to the bay. And in many of those building opportunities, we speak about why we do what we do. And I have a presentation that goes back to references things like Genesis and we shall have dominion over all God's creatures. And then things like the Roman Emperor Justinian, who said the seas, the shores of the sea, the air, the waters are common to everyone. And so to sum it up, my point is that I think every single day that my job continues to be, I know that every single day my job continues to be to remind people that when I say ensure the health of the resource and anglers' access to it, or for the benefit of the general public, more specifically, the general public is that person you see in the mirror. And it's very easy for recreational fishing or just people in general to put ourselves in silos. But when it comes to the invasives count and the work we're doing, really the answer to the question why is that we want to encourage people to intersect with their resource. And if there's an opportunity where there's going to be fish that are all over the place, why not introduce them to a fish that's going to be easier to catch, going to be good for them within reason? And yes, they can kind of tackle a challenge as well. And maybe that be the reason they get off the couch and go fishing. So I explain the Great Chesapeake Invasives Count as simple as possible as a big tent. And let's all share it. Let's all connect. Let's all learn, because that's what we're doing here anyway to try and manage our resource moving forward. So it's squarely within CCA's work and become a really important part of our work since founding in 2020 and now running throughout the year, on and on. So next slide, please. So we've covered why the invasives, what they are, where they are, a little bit about our programming. But in the invasives count, we specifically ask people to log into a smartphone app after registering for free. They use a smartphone app. They take a picture of their catch or a picture of their catch's stomach contents if they take it home. And so we're looking at some of the data points that managers and folks that on Lena's team want to understand through sampling to understand what's out there. We also want to inform people about the fact that these fish do have an impact and what that means in a scientific standpoint, and also how that relates to some of the policies that may shape harvest of them or regulation of them or lack thereof regulation. So again, we want to use this as an opportunity to share with people information, but also have them provide us information. So in the end, the count, we provide prizes to people each and every month for providing data. And there's a couple sample pictures there. That's actually, that lower picture is a blue catfish with a stomach full of blue crab. So we know they eat them, of course, like Lena mentioned, and you can only understand how valuable they are to the watershed and why we want to get people to catch them and remove them. Also, you are what you eat. So as Lena said, these fish are getting this regional flavor that may not relate to them in the South or them in the Mississippi where they belong. They taste like crabs. I mean, go try them. They're like the cheapest crabs possible, right? You know, it's just through a different avenue. Um, Next slide, please. So there they are. I think we already saw that one picture on the left. These are, of course, the resources that we borrow from our department that we're so, proud to work with. Next slide. I mentioned that we use a smartphone app, and so the genesis of this was just a conversation about partnership. The Angler Action Foundation is a Florida-based entity that created a smartphone app to attack better understanding what happens to fish species in shallow waters during recent cold events that have become more frequent in Florida's Gulf Coast and other portions of the state. And because their state manages certain species within the state structure, because it's so large, where we may work with other states, ultimately when this one cold event happened, I think in about 05, 06, the Angler Action Foundation created an app called iAngler so that anglers could provide real-time data to managers and scientists to analyze, to really understand what they were interacting with on the water, especially after these freeze events. And it allowed them to really zero in from a regulatory aspect to balance access so anglers could fish in these places without major impact. And in other places, it was just no question, there's not enough fish. No, we can't go there. We have to conserve them. So it's a precise tool. It puts the hands it puts the power in the hands of the anglers to really help. And there's no question that the recreational fishing community is passionate about what they do, and passionate about how policies can affect them. So the more and more that we can work with the agencies, the better off we are. And it's across the spirit of the sportsman community in supporting management as a whole. So this is just the beginning of that partnership with iAngler, but it makes it possible. They donate the use of their smartphone app to us and so many other partners that we've now spread the use of to since the invasives count began in 2020. Next, please. As you've seen this logo quite a bit on the screen twice here, Yamaha Right Waters is their program of stewardship, which makes this possible. It provides us the operational budget to then seek other partners and put this program into work. And they've been a foundational partner since day one. As an international power company, a motorsports company, and outboard company, they wanted to take care of the ecosystem more than anyone. It ensures that people are buying boats, going fishing, and taking care of these resources that we care about so much. So we've had a fantastic relationship with them and be able to work well, not only on the invasive stuff work, but the habitat work as well, thanks to their support. Next, please. Here's a whole bunch of other partners because it takes many. And the top left one there is the best because just before this, I got to watch Live with Lenny, and I know Zach's on here, and I think Lenny is too. And so that's a fantastic partner that's made the invasives count what it is. Every single month on Live with Lenny, we provide an update and give out prizes to our participants. So the folks that register for free go out fishing, log their catch. We draw from their names, and Lenny and Zach put it out there for the public to know who wins the prizes and what's going on out there in the fishing world. And so anybody that's an angler on this call, make sure you're subscribing and liking the Fish Talk crew on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the things, as well as their different partner publications, Spin Sheet and Prop Talk, because you can stay connected to a lot of really interesting information that they put out there for the public. Their periodicals, their magazines, newsprint style, full color, really well done and available free throughout the watershed. So quick plug for them. All of our partners here, and this is just the beginning of them, there's many, many more, make it possible for us to do this work. Again, we're connecting the general public through whether it be government agencies, other nonprofits, companies that have a vested interest in the future of our fisheries. We're all working together. We make our data available to any agency or any academic that may ask for it. We do ask anglers to provide their location, but we don't give out personal information that can identify an individual to any catch, and we're only providing it through this scientific pathways. And really, the goal here is not to find out people's fishing spots. We'll actually talk about the specific goal here next. Next, please. So here's what we're trying to figure out. We've talked about some of the management stuff. This is a busy slide, but focus on the middle there. Think of that middle blue box that is a fish population. And we have birth and immigration as the two ways that fish on the top there can kind of come into that population. So they either move into the area or they're born. Well, how do populations decrease? Things die, and they immigrate, they leave. And so we have to have a general understanding of what's happening at what rate, in what area, over what time to ask or answer the question of what do we have out there and how many are there. We can then go further to say what is sustainable. Sustainable generally meaning how much spawning type biomass of the species do we need out there so that they can sustain their population at a certain level that we deem acceptable, or some scientific modeling can maybe tell us is a good level based on some models that are out there. And so there's a dynamic way that fisheries are managed, but it's all based on knowing what's out there. And that's where the core of this data comes from. So it answers the question, why is it important for DNR to know that that blue catfish in the top left picture, is 19 inches long. It was caught at this location. And oh, by the way, I kept it as well. It had blue crabs in its stomach and there were eggs. This is the kind of information that we can provide to DNR when think about how they would be able to, what they would have to do to really get a representative sample across the watershed in another way. On the right side is just a sample of some of the volunteer angler log systems that already exist at Maryland DNR. This is just more of similar data that was really just inspired, by the invasive issue and also the opportunity. Next, please. So here's some of the species distribution. This is some of our actual data plotted by DNR for us. Their different size fish this is 1 year versus another in our tournament. But you can see how they're spread out throughout the watershed, like I mentioned. And this is also just reflective of where people went fishing to provide us their data, not the population. And that's what's, to me, intriguing, interesting, and also confusing about a lot of the things that are happening in the fisheries management arena. It's all about that perspective that sometimes takes you a minute to understand, what am I looking at? These blue dots across the map. But this is just where people are providing some data. The next slide, please. So this is something different. This is size distribution, and this gets back to that population dynamic model. How many little fish are out there? At what rate do they grow? Therefore, what assumption can we make about their population, what's out there? And so just on the left side, of course, is various size blue catfish. In this map is a different size icon. It means that a larger fish was caught there. And so this is just from our data from one of the years presented in a different way, the map. A lot of small fish on the eastern shore, some big fish up north of Baltimore, Upper Bay, some big fish right off Annapolis, some big fish right in DC. That all checks out with what I know about these fish. Little fish available everywhere, big fish in some of these reliable spots, but that's not for me to tell you about. That's for Eric Packard, who's up next, the absolute expert at fishing for anything. What's on the right here is just a graphical representation of the length of fish on the y-axis and the age on the x-axis across 4 different watersheds in Virginia, and then the trend line there. And it's just saying that in surveys they're seeing fish that are of a certain age and have a variable amount of length with an average in that year class. And so this is just kind of telling us what is the shape and size. You could plot nearly identical data about all of us. We're all genetically different, so we're going to be different shapes and sizes and growth rates, and there's environmental conditions which play with that. There's all sorts of things that happen that affect, but we can also average it, right? And that's what this is showing us, that there's a little bit of a broader variability in size as they get older. That makes sense. They're all more similar in size in their younger years. And so I think this is pretty consistent with a lot of fish species, but I think it's, to me, interesting the different ways, again, that you can look at these and from data tell different stories, which we continue to plan to try and do more of with the invasives count. Next slide, please. This is something that Lena mentioned, like cutting the slices of a tree, counting the rings of a tree. And I was so happy when she mentioned that because it's one of the things as a self-proclaimed fish nerd, I find to be just exciting about fish, because some of that data I just was showing is based on the age of the fish. And you can guess an age of a fish all day long. Like the guy at the boardwalk, it's like, how old are you? What's your weight? You get the big banana thing at the Ocean City boardwalk. Like, we can play that game. That's not science. right? What they do is take that inner ear stone, that ear bone, it's an otolith, Otolith, that and this microscope in the middle here is a cross section of an otolith. It's kind of hard to see, but there's faint rings of trees that you can see under the microscope. And so CCA was actually able to fund some research with Salisbury University. The two young ladies on the right, the one on the right, the far right in the blue shirt is Jocelyn Phileas. She's one of our fellows who went to St. Mary's College. And on the left is Kendall Weingard, who was a Salisbury student that worked as part of one of our programs. And so not only are we asking people to collect data, we're doing some of our fundraising and corporate partnership. We're taking some of that funding to really support the future of science. And an otolith tells us how old the fish is so that we understand, these population dynamics moving forward. This is really the backbone of a lot of fisheries management and population assessment across our country. There's a neat little place in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. It's an age and growth lab for the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. It's rumored to be haunted, and it's full of tons of little tiny ear bones of fish. And I don't know if fish haunted or people, but it's been, in Cape Cod, essentially, Woods Hole, just I guess the elbow part. Since for a very, very long time. And I've been there as part of a fisheries management education course where I got to meet the people that do this. And one thing was pretty obvious when you walked in. It was a building full of women, and there was one gentleman that worked there, and I said, "What's going on here?" And they actually shared this with part of the tour that women are far better at accurately aging fish using otoliths. I guess it's an attention to detail thing, at least judging myself. Um, and so ultimately that's what's happening up there in Woods Hole. And it's kind of neat because there's lots of different ways you approach counting these that's very unique. And every fish has one. So any fish you catch moving forward, if you're this type of person that liked, the science class stuff, dig around in the lower brain cavity and they look like fingernail material and they can tell the story. Also, the bigger the fish and fish that speak with or that utilize sound waves more, like a drum species, black drum, red drum, even spotted sea trout, they'll actually have a larger otolith because it's part of a component of them receiving sounds and such, like an ear bone. I could blab forever, but two more slides real quick. So there's some of our stuff, as I already mentioned. Get connected with FishTalk, get connected with CCA. Also, Fish Hunt Maryland, that has some great information about where to go fishing around the state. And there's readily available information across the web with an easy search about where you're going to go. But Eric is going to talk about some of that next. Next slide, second to last. This is just some relativity stuff. So if you look over time, this is just landings of reported landings of blue cats over time. Obviously increased. We saw a downturn in 2020. We can all probably guess why. And then an increase. If I had 24 on here, it would be quite a bit higher. There's some complexities about what's harvested in the Potomac versus what's harvested in Maryland waters of the Bay, just because of management and jurisdiction. But I definitely heard the Potomac almost putting up. Oh, this is Potomac. No, this is both. This is both. I heard the Potomac putting up above 4 million last year. So where this is combined, the Potomac's already way above that. I've also heard the Potomac's had a little bit of a downturn, which is a commonality with invasive species. They often enter into an area, peak in population, spike, come back down and plateau. And there's a lot of conversation around that in the folks that have been at it for quite a while. And the Potomac River fishermen have definitely been utilizing these fish in many different ways, much longer than Upper Bay or other portions of the Chesapeake. That red arrow is the current Maryland quota for commercial striped bass, our state fish. So that quota is roughly 1.34 million for the Chesapeake Bay, a little bit more on the coast. And that's just again, to compare how many more in volume in pounds is being caught, how much more in pounds is being caught in blue cats. And for an economic comparison, unfortunately, they don't stack up. It's not 1-to-1. Striped bass can be on the low side, $1.75, $2. That's pretty low in recent history. As high as $5, good days, $6.50, $7, maybe even $8 a pound, depending on the fish and where it is and who's selling it. So you can see a lot of, let's just call it 2 to 7 for striped bass per pound whole. blue cat could be 50 cents, it could be 75 cents, it could be 80 cents a pound whole. And that's because, one, they have to be processed by a USDA certified harvester under a certain inspection standard, which is they're the only fish species in the country that has to have that. It's a long story that I don't have time to explain tonight, but I'd encourage you to search it if you're interested. But there are processors in Maryland that are USDA certified. There's also just a lot of different things happening to try and figure out how we attack this problem collectively, which is pretty great because in the end, a lot of the work I do is related to one group versus another, and opinions about something they all want to use and maybe have to conserve, like striped bass, like crabs, like oysters. Um, these species, there's definitely people that want to protect them and hold them in high abundance because they enjoy them, especially the trophy-sized catfish and the snakeheads. And that's just, bound to happen in any sort of shared system here. And we have methods to work through it and collect, and we as an organization always want to support dialogue, support uh, advancing science, being inquisitive, asking questions, listening, sharing about this species, and that's ultimately where we land on this. And that's a segue to my last slide because there's no better place to gather than around a table to share something that you may have harvested or purchased or somebody harvested near you. I think there's obviously a lot of benefit to things being local. Just like any good thing, we can market it, use marketing to totally mess it up. Like a light salad dressing, remember that? Or diet sodas or light beer. There's unique ways we can convince people something's better, but the bottom line is these fish are what they eat. This is a website, ChesapeakeBlueCatfish.org, that was developed by one of our partners that I can't believe I didn't mention earlier, who's just a tremendous rock star. She's the food services coordinator of Caroline County Public Schools, and her name is Beth Brewster. Um, Not only does she help feed 6,000 plus students, well, believe majority of which are fallen below a certain income level, doing great work in Caroline County. She's been working steadfastly to try and find opportunities for fish to be caught by local fishermen and go into local school systems and be served in a completely certified and good to go, above board way. She and her team work together with various stakeholders to build this website. Um, and it's a resource that's full of information that's largely just gathered from lots of other partners. So again, it's out there in the spirit of a resource for everybody, and it's full of recipes. I think almost every single one of them is a PDF you can print out and just keep in your kitchen and figure it out. So blue catfish is available all over the region if you're not an angler. And if you don't see it somewhere locally, give a quick search online at Maryland's Best, or just tell them they're missing out. And if you're an angler, I think that's perfect for the next speaker, Eric, who is going to tell us about catching these fish.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really glad how you mentioned things really did change drastically in 2020, right, for us and the environment. Your work is so critical to helping us understand this issue and how we can help support your mission, which is our mission as well, keeping our beloved bay in balance. So I really appreciate all the information. It's very hard to believe we're at the top of the hour. This could have been definitely just you really helped us out here. So I want to be very respectful of everyone's time and very respectful to Eric. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know you have some stuff to talk about, and I'm just going to give the floor to you. Please welcome Eric.
Okay, can you guys hear me just fine?
Perfect.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you can go to the next slide if you wish. I'll go. I'm going to basically talk about snakehead and blue catfish because flathead blue cats are similar, except for flathead are on the bottom. Blue cats feed within the water column. You can go to the next slide. And here you can see various fish, different people holding fish. Go to the next slide and I'll show some baits. I think we're running out of time. Okay, first of all, let's start with snakehead. Snakehead are basically in almost every watershed, rivers that is, and tributaries that feed into the bay. These fish, they have a high tolerance to salinity, salt and water, I guess, and they were able to move up the rivers and creeks. And what you're going to find is that they like muddy bottoms, and they like to go to areas that are very shallow, warmer water, grasses, lily pads and things like that. And so these fish are in very, very thin water, anything from 6 inches to, they're in tidal areas as well, and lakes also now. But easiest thing to use to catch those are chatterbaits, which is the bait that's on the left of your screen. This bait right here. And I like to use those along weed edges, lily pad edges, casting out and just running them through there, trolling them along if I'm jumping from space to space. But most people like to use topwater frogs. You can see the topwater frog there next to the chatterbait. Easiest way to catch these fish is cast as bait onto the shoreline, drag it off the shoreline, because they're in such thin water, they're sitting there waiting for a minnow or something to come by, and they'll go up and attack it and eat it. You can work it through the grasses, you can work it through lily pads, just hop, stop, hop, hop, stop, things like that, and work them through there. You can catch them on fluke. The fluke is below the below the frog, on a weedless hook. You hook them up weedless and cast them into the lily pads, cast them into the grasses along the shoreline, drag it off the shoreline, and they'll eat those as well. So, like I said, they're pretty prolific. Their blackwater is basically the where you'll find majority of them. We're actually there's a big focus on them over the blackwater. And what you're going to find now is that you got bow hunters in some of these areas, so they've reduced the population down. You're going to find a little bit harder time trying to find them. On the Patuxent River, the Potomac River, if you look for, like Google, use Google Maps, go to fishtalkmag.com and do a search, and you can find information there as well about where to find them, where to hunt for them, and how to fish for them. At any rate, the ponds that are from flood ponds from heavy rain and so forth and so on, and tidal areas, when the water comes up then recedes, they leave these ponds along the Patuxent Potomac River, and they'll hold fish. And you'll be really surprised. The water is fairly shallow. Sometimes I'll wade fish and put a pair of chest waders on and cast frogs in and catch them there as well. As for blue catfish are they're everywhere. They've gotten to the waters probably late 90s, early 2000s, and the population has exploded. They're almost in every tributary, if not in every tributary of the bay, which they've already said this earlier. Easiest way to catch them is using similar to the rig here on the right side. You use a number 6 hook. They have a egg sinker here that then they have a swivel snap. And anyway, it's probably 30 pounds, 60 pound test line, depending upon what you have. I have one here that I purchased. It's probably 60 pound line, 6/0 hook, but it's slightly different. It has a bobber in it. It's called a Santee rig. And unlike the one that you see here, this will float and keep the bait up off the bottom into the water column where blue catfish will eat it. What I bait them with is you can use owleye, cut owleye, frozen or fresh. The best thing to use though is white perch. If you catch white perch or purchase white perch, they focus in on the perch. What I found with these fish is that when the yellow perch come in, they're focused on the yellow perch. When the white perch come in, they're focused on the white perch. When the shad come in, they're eating shad. So during these certain times, it may be difficult to catch them on other baits if you're not fishing the bait that they are currently seeking and hunting out. These fish get big. They get the average size I'm catching are probably at 5 pounds, 6 pounds. You'll catch 30 pounds, 40 pounders, and they can get up to 60 to 80 pounds. They're really, really large fish. You can catch them on artificial baits too. I like to use a chatterbait. I like to use jigs. I like to use flukes, and I like to use jerk baits. Now, some of these baits I'm using in different water depths. If I'm fishing over at the Mattawoman, or actually Mallows Bay, where the wrecks are, there was a picture of me earlier in front of one of the wrecks. Those fish are in 6 to 8 foot water. I'm catching them on a jig, 1/2 inch to 3/4, half ounce to 3/4 ounce jigs with a 4-inch white paddle tail on it, or a chatterbait, trolling them, casting them, just bouncing off the bottom, and you'll catch these fish. If you're fishing shallower water, I've seen them in water as shallow as 4 feet. I was fishing for yellow perch just recently, this past month, and I had my kayak out there, I had my side scan going, and I could see fish 40 feet each side of me in this hole. It's about 4 feet deep, which traditionally holds yellow perch, and they stage up there, then they'll run up and spawn, then they'll leave. But the hole was full of catfish. I caught 18 of them in there, and I caught those on artificial baits, on jerk baits. So they also, I just wanted to mention real quick, jug fishing. If you have kids, have a boat, have kayaks, you can fish 10 of these per person from July 1 to February 28th. I use 6 feet of 60-pound test line. About 2 foot from the end of it, I'll put a 6/0 hook with a 2-ounce weight on it, and I just put a piece of aloe wire or white perch on it, drop them off, and then just have the kids chase the jugs around. The jugs start moving and pulling through the water, like in Jaws when they were harpooning them. They were pulling the big barrels. So the kids are having fun chasing these around, pick them up, and they'll hand line them in, and you net the fish up. It's a lot of fun to do that, especially like in Mallows Bay, Potomac River, Patuxent River. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. You can also reach me at, I think, Molly, you can put my email address up, and then also direct message me on Instagram, Facebook, or reach me through FishTalk Magazine.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And you provided some very informative and just practical ways, especially for fishermen out there like myself, who really don't know what they're doing on like what are the best ways to catch these invasive fish species. So we're very grateful that you spent your evening with us, as well as every other speaker. I realize we're a little over time, so before we open up the floor for a Q&A, if our speakers are so gracious to just spend a few more minutes, there were a couple of questions in the chat that I'd like to get to. But if you don't mind, Rebecca, I'd love to go to the closing prayer. And then that way I can just be respectful of everyone's time. And if you want to hang out a little bit longer, that's great. But we always close with another reflection. And this is a beautiful one. This is a continuation from Steve Ward, just really great reflections for signs of spring. The fishermen are skinning bark from off their fish trap poles and boiling tar to smear the scene and patching up the holes. The smell of copper fills the air, and they all smile and sing, for this is how the fishermen know that it is spring. They have to see no calendar to know that spring is here, for the cormorant and coming in from points both far and near. And then too a fish hawk circles gracefully above the foam, screaming out his joyous message, spring is here and I am home. And the fishermen are driving poles as if they all were mad to trap the run of the herring, the hardheads and the shad. Although it is February and the cold nor'easters sing, the fishermen are merry, for they know that it is spring. All up and down the Chesapeake, the western eastern shore, from old Cape Charles way down the bay, clear up to Baltimore. You can smell the turbots boiling, you can hear the truck nice ring. When the fishermen start toiling on their nets, you know that it is spring.